It's time now for business news next on the programme with Catherine Bennett. Good afternoon, Catherine.
Afternoon.
You're starting out with the World Economic Forum, which is kicking off in Davos, Switzerland. What can we expect?
Well, for its 50th edition, Davos is going green. So the climate crisis is going to be high on the agenda this year, and climate activist Greta Thunberg is back to put pressure on business leaders and heads of state to take immediate action to tackle global warming. US President Donald Trump is also making an appearance after missing the 2019 edition. He's clashed with Thunberg in the past and will likely be challenged on his rollback of environmental policies and, of course, pulling the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement. Climate change was one of the topics touched on in Oxfam's new Global Inequality Report, traditionally released just before Davos. This year's report highlighted the gender imbalance in wealth inequality. James Wilson has more on that.
With the annual gathering of the super-rich at the World Economic Forum beginning today in Davos, Switzerland, Oxfam have released their annual report into the state of poverty around the world, laying bare the inequities of global wealth distribution. It finds that 2,153 billionaires have more money than 60% of the world's population, whilst 42% of women do not have a paying job because of their work in the home. In fact, the world's richest 22 men have more money than all Africa's 326 million women put together.
If you just look around the world, more than 30 countries are seeing protests. People are on the streets, and what are they saying? That they're not going to accept this inequality.
The report urges governments to increase taxes on the world's richest citizens, but also focuses on the need to take action on climate change. Both the Swedish climate change activist Greta Thunberg and US President Donald Trump are scheduled to attend the Swiss summit. Whilst many countries have committed to reaching net zero carbon emissions by 2050, there is still disagreement on how to get there, and scepticism that the target will be achieved.
We'll have more on that Oxfam report later from our business editor Stephen Carroll, reporting live from Davos at 6:45 p.m. Paris time. Now let's take a look at the markets. In Europe, markets opened mixed but have declined over the course of trading. The FTSE traded down 0.33%, with Paris's CAC 40 also falling 0.25%. Frankfurt's DAX reversed earlier lows, coming to just above the flat line. One head of state who won't be present at Davos is French President Emmanuel Macron. He's staying home to launch French business summit Choose France, welcoming more than 200 business leaders to the forum today in Versailles. Netflix, YouTube, BMW, Coca-Cola and Rolls-Royce are just some of the illustrious names attending. France has already announced nearly €4 billion worth of investments coming into the country over the next few years. Meanwhile, across the Channel, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is also wooing investors at the first UK-Africa Investment Summit.
The world's 15 fastest growing economies are in Africa. 2/3 of African economies are expanding faster than the global average. Africa is the future. And the UK has a huge and active role to play in that future.
The UK is looking further afield for trade relationships as it is set to lose its largest trading partner, the European Union, in just under 2 weeks. Britain may struggle to establish itself in Africa, with some viewing efforts to forge ties like this as too little, too late. Countries like Russia and China already have a firm foothold in Africa. The summit comes after British Chancellor Sajid Javid said that Britain would diverge from EU rules after Brexit. In an interview with the Financial Times on Friday, Javid ruled out alignment with EU regulations, saying there will not be alignment, we will not be a rule taker, we will not be in the single market, and we will not be in the customs union, and we will do this by the end of the year. He showed no sympathy for UK companies, saying that they had already had 3 years to get ready for a new trading relationship. A message that startled Brussels, with EU diplomats warning that it would lead to economic damage. UK businesses also responded to his remarks, warning that food prices would rise and jobs could be affected. Looking at Australia now, where of course bushfires have devastated communities across the country. Businesses are of course suffering too, with images of destruction and chaos putting the nation's €27 billion tourist industry at risk.
Kangaroo Island has long been a popular destination for visitors to Australia, well known for its pristine beaches and endangered wildlife. But after bushfires swept through the tourist hotspot, cancellations began flooding in and businesses on the island are struggling.
People have stopped coming. They think the whole island's on fire, and it's not. So we really need to send that message out that the island's still accessible. We've still got planes flying in, ferries coming every day. There's plenty. It's probably a better time than ever to come to Kangaroo Island because there's less people here at the moment.
Tourism accounts for 3% of the country's GDP, and 1 in 13 Australians work in the industry or in hospitality. Since the bushfires began late last year, bookings from certain international markets have plummeted by between 30 and 40%, all of which has led the Australian government to announce a €47 million rescue package to help the industry.
This sends a really important message that Kangaroo Island is open for business, but also that Australia is open for business and that tourists and visitors can still come and have the same incredible time and experience that we've always prided ourselves on offering.
Since the fires began in September, 29 people and millions of animals have been killed, while an area about a third the size of Germany has been razed to the ground. Several days of rain have seen fires reduced in size, and firefighters have taken advantage of the milder weather to put in place preventative measures that will help contain future blazes.
That was James Wilson there on the ramifications of Australia's bushfires on the tourism industry. Now, starting a little bit closer to home, it's set to be easier to get around France this Monday after Labour leaders at the Paris transport operator RATP voted to suspend a crippling metro and bus strike which entered its 46th day. Alexander Orcott reports.
The Paris metro almost back to normal after 50 days of continuous strikes. This Monday, only a handful of lines will be disrupted. The buses, trams and trains moving once again because the majority of strikers are back at work. And it's a strike that's cost them dearly. This father of two has missed out on more than €2,000 of wages.
We're not going back to work because we give in. It's not that at all. We're going back to work to get our heads above water financially. And then on Friday 24th, the strike is back on.
The 24th of January is when the government is set to submit its pension reform bill to Parliament, with a vote due in the coming months. Some hardliners wish their colleagues would have held out for longer.
When a pay slip is at zero, €200 more changes nothing. That's why we must wait to hit them hard and show what we have to say, because a big demo is coming on Friday.
The baton now passes from transport staff to workers from other sectors. In the docks, they're not taking part in continuous strikes, but will close the ports from Wednesday to Friday.
The aim is to keep pushing, to keep the movement alive, and keep calling for this reform to be scrapped.
Meanwhile, lawyers will again be throwing down their gowns ahead of the Friday demo. The Paris Opera also wants the government to face the music as they call for their early retirement rights to be maintained.
Well, I'm extremely excited to be able to use the train to get back home today. So
it really
that's good
has
news.
cut my commute in half. Thank you very much for that, Catherine.